there are circumstances that are beyond our control, absolutely. But we all do have some degree of choice, and being able to see those choices and make them, even if you don't love the choices you have. Choice is always tricky as a sociologist, knowing that we have like systems of oppression and control that shape our experiences, as well as when we're children, we don't have choices in the same way. But that recognition of, I want something different than this, or there might be, like, I see someone else is doing something, let me learn more about that. There's some agency there that we all have. And so just, I think that is important, is looking for those places.
Welcome to Unmute with Priya, the podcast where silence ends, voices rise, and women rediscover the freedom to speak and live authentically, especially in life after 40. This show is proudly sponsored by Project Icon. I'm your host, Priya Sudarsanam. Let's dive into today's conversation. My guest today is Dr. Christine Pettit. Christine is a sociologist, leadership coach, and organizational consultant whose work focuses on the intersection of social change and personal and organizational development. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a fun conversation as we, talking before we started recording, talking about what unmuting is and how we're helping others to unmute and still going through that process in our own lives and the things that we have to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's dive into this, because that's a lot. Sociologist, leadership coach, and organizational consultant. What drew you into this work?
Yeah, I think from a young age, I've had a strong sense of justice, and a lot of that connects to my own personal background, upbringing, and what I saw around me in the world. And I initially started out studying psychology, really, I think, to understand my family and family dynamics. And then as I progressed through my education, I realized the social piece was important as well, not just the individual, but also the way society is set up.
Right.
And so sociology really called me. And so that was my course of study. I went through and got a master's and PhD in sociology and studied social movements and social change. And I've had a varied work experience as a union leader, as someone who has taught sociology, and as an organizational executive director, amongst many other things.
Wow.
Yeah, but a through line in my work is really about social change and about how people can be connected to it, to understand it and be part of it, recognizing that society isn't the way it is just by accident, but it's through a series of decisions, of policies, and that people can be part of it. And now my work also is very personal too, including the change that we make in our own lives and how that's important as well.
When you were talking about how society is not by accident, I immediately was like, that's a parallel for our lives. Like we can we can be a part of our lives. Life doesn't have to happen to us. So
yes.
For anybody who's listening, I think I have a psychology background and did sociology courses, but can you just define what sociology is? So anybody who's listening to this understands where we're starting from.
Yeah, it's really studying the kind of social structures that shape us. And it can be from smaller social structures like family, religion, institutions, and there's a whole bunch of different kind of threads of sociology as well. But it's really understanding these things that we kind of take for granted, that they vary by culture, they vary over time, they can be changed, and there's different ways of looking at and understanding them. And so that was a big part of when I taught sociology. I loved teaching the intro to sociology classes because it was just like seeing people kind of wake up and like just look at things that they kind of took for granted in society and start to apply different lenses and understandings to them.
So with that being said, this might be an obvious question, but how much of who we become is shaped by systems that we don't even realize are running in the back?
I think so much. There's, of course, the nature versus nurture debate. And I think both come into play for sure, but a lot of things that we think are natural or just how we are, or that we make as kind of individual either accomplishments or failings, so much of it is shaped by the society around us.
And then what would you say in your experience and working with clients or organizations helps people to wake up and say, "Hey, wait, we
Yeah,
don't have to do it this way." What have you found?
I think that it really varies by the person, and the organization, but there needs to be some curiosity to what could be different or how things got the way that they were. And also, something I've noticed is that waking up, quote unquote, it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily happen in the moment. In the moment you share some information, or in the moment that you pose a question for them to consider, but it can be like kind of planting seeds too. So I've had people come back to me after conversations or even much later and say, "Oh, kind of seed, it grew and I understood it differently later." But I think curiosity and openness are two important pieces to kind of understanding how things are created and how they can shift.
Let's talk about how they can shift. So how do systems change? How can we change systems? I mean, that's
Mm,
a
yeah,
or
asking the
even
hard question.
I told you I'd follow your lead. This is all you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, how can systems change? I mean, I think about there's so many examples. Part of my work with a nonprofit in Long Beach was really focused on systems change at that kind of government policy level, whether it was the school district, the local government, county, or state. And so part of the beginning of it is understanding how things are shaped. Kind of, we would do a power analysis to understand really who makes the decisions, what are the key policies that shape this issue that we're trying to make change around, what are the ways that we could make change, and then develop strategies from there, but really working with getting back to the individual too, how important it is that they can, go speak up at city council or go get to know their local electeds, especially at the local level. Politics are very accessible. And also that their experience and their story, there's expertise in there, there's value in there. And that a lot of times people who they think they're facing a personal problem, but so many people are facing it. So when they connect with others, they see, there's kind of taking those pieces of how we got here, and then applying them to what can change. And yeah, so that's kind of the policy realm. There's a lot of different ways that systems
Yeah.
can change.
Well, you said something there that and seeing what can change
Hmm.
because and then what do you do when you're in a system that feels so daunting and that especially what we're dealing
Yeah,
with now in the country politically that people are trying to affect change but feels like you're hitting roadblocks. What do you do in those instances? And I feel like there's a parallel there not just with politics, but you might face that in your family, you might face that in your religion, you might face that things where you're just trying to make change and you can't.
absolutely. That's where I go back to. And many people have said it in different ways, but doing what you can where you are and
Yeah.
really looking at what is in your sphere of control, what's in your sphere of influence, and knowing that what you can do, even if it's in how you treat your child, even if it's in, how you show up in your neighborhood, that those things can cause ripples as well, and that's really important. How you treat yourself and the things that you can do that, like I said, are in your sphere of control, those can have a big impact. And so it's important to do that as well. And I understand it's easy to feel hopeless and overwhelmed. When I'm feeling that way, I go back to that. What can I do where I am right now? What's in my sphere of influence and control?
Oh, I love that. What's in my sphere of influence and control? Because I think, and especially as women, we are, like we want to do it all. We're the caretakers. I just had this conversation before you, and it was like going through 40 years of just getting stuff done and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm tired from this. But understanding that you can ask that question, what's in my sphere of control?
Mhm.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit about because you work with different groups of people. Who do you work
Yeah, I work with a lot of individual leaders one on one, and I define leadership broadly. It's not like always the executive director or the CEO, people at all levels of leadership, including thinking about being leaders in their life, in their families. And communities. So, usually, I work with people who maybe they're going through a transition, want to make a change that's in alignment with their values, or they're kind of considering two different paths, or maybe they've already made that change and are figuring out what's next. But I work with a lot of folks in kind of that transition phase and also in understanding their own leadership and stepping into self leadership as well, and making choices from a grounded and intentional place. So it can span, like what I actually coach on is broad, but the core of it is that building up of self leadership and making intentional choices too. Sometimes it's really like sometimes my homework for folks is to do less. Like we talk about doing all the things. A lot of times people who come to me have been over functioning and like maybe they're really driven by purpose, by their values, or maybe they have these really strong like often they go together like perfectionist driver tendencies, and that can be really beautiful and it can really burn people out. So also, working with people to develop kind of more harmony in their life as well. So that's kind of that individual level. I work with a lot of teams as well, boards and staff teams. Common thread in both my individual coaching and in these kind of team settings is communication and conflict and how to navigate that and how to communicate effectively. And I do training on with the DISC assessment, which is looking at different work and communication styles. So there's
with?
that. And then I do broader kind of strategic planning engagements and that sort of work with organizations too. So to help
Wow.
them like figure out what is the course we're going on for the next few years. Um, and then I'm like, and I've also served as an interim executive director too. And that's kind of like in my toolkit of like just supporting organizations again in that transition phase, that transition of leadership.
But that's a lot.
It is.
But it must be so satisfying because you're really, I mean, and empowering because it sounds like you're really empowering leaders, whether it's individuals, organizations.
Yeah.
And that intentionality really goes a long way. There's a speech therapy program that I got certified in, and it's about speaking intentionally. And it's for people with
Mhm.
Parkinson's or other disorder, related movement disorders. And it's all about with intention, with intention. And there's so much that shifts in one session when you bring awareness to that. Do it with
Oh,
intention. And I
yeah.
think like it's really helped me to just move through my life and do everything intentionally. So that's a very, very powerful. Could you take me through a journey of a client, maybe an individual client of where they started with you and then where they ended up, even if you're still continuing with them?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good.
You probably have a lot.
Yeah, someone just asked me for like a quote unquote success story. I mean, I could say like I've had a few clients who've come to me where they knew they wanted to make a transition in their work. So I'll just go at that level. I could give an organizational example as
Yeah.
well. But at that individual level, they knew they wanted to make a transition in their work. They had things to balance, family, finances, all of that. But the work that we did together was really about clarifying when they do make that shift, what are their yeses and nos? What are the things that they're saying yes to in a new position? And what are the things they're looking at that they don't want in the next position? And really not leaving from a place of like, oh, I just need to get to the next. But again, going back to that intentional piece of things. Like, what are my values? What's the kind of life that I'm setting up for myself? And how does work connect to that? And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but I've worked with people to help to find those kind of core elements and then transition into new roles as well. And then from there, sometimes it's about, okay, now I'm in that new role. What does leadership look like for me now?
Yeah.
And how does it's balancing all those pieces of taking care of oneself and leading from values and dealing with inner critics and all of that too.
I think, when you what you said right at the beginning when you were just sharing this is that what you'll say yes to, no to, and I think a lot of times,
Mhm.
especially as women, we think we have to say yes to everything, and
Yes.
you can say no. I think knowing that you have the option to say no
Yes.
and that you don't have to align with everything, that's really powerful as well.
Mhm. You talked about choice a little bit at the beginning, or maybe didn't use that word, but choice is a core value of mine too, recognizing where you do have choice and making intentional choices. I think what you said was that life doesn't just happen to you. And it's like, yes, there are circumstances that are beyond our control, absolutely, but we all do have some degree of choice, and being able to see those choices and make them, even if you don't love the choices you have, but recognizing where you do that, that is a value of mine that I work with people around too.
I've found too, and you can tell me if you agree with this, exactly what you said. Sometimes life happens and we didn't have a choice in those circumstances, as dire as that can be, but we can make
Mhm.
the choice to want something better, not knowing how we're going to get there, but just having that intention that
Mhm.
I don't want this anymore, but I want this can really,
Absolutely.
really drive where somebody's going. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I always, choice is always tricky as a sociologist, knowing that we have like systems of oppression and control that shape our experiences, as well as when we're children, we don't have choices in the same way. But yes, that recognition of, I want something different than this, or there might be like, I see someone else is doing something, let me learn more about that. There's some agency there that we all have. And so just I think that is important, is looking for those places.
When you mentioned transitions, this was a question. You said transitions, and that was exactly what the word that came into my head. So I love
Mhm.
that. In your opinion, what are transitions, or why do they crack people open so much? Why does it hit you
Mhm.
in such a deep way? It's just there's really no level of this is a bigger transition than the other. It could just be a transition. But what have you found?
Yeah. I think in some cases they can really shake up people's identity and their sense of themselves. And especially if maybe there's some conflict around it or some judgment that they're having, like they're not fitting in a particular place. There can be a lot of baggage around there that has to do with their sense of self and identity. So that can be really hard. And then different people have different appetites for change as well. Some people run toward it, open arms, and other people really crave stability and security. And so there's also just different psychological needs and change. And kind of the work that I do around communication styles, work and communication styles, there's parallels in terms of looking at the different types of needs that come up for people during change. So for some, it's more autonomy and control. For others, it's more a relational aspect. Some people really need all the information, and sometimes you can't get all of your needs met in
Right.
change and transition. And so that I think is what makes it hard.
Yeah. Any suggestions on how to move through for a person, for an individual, how to move through a transition with as much ease as you possibly can?
Yeah, I think building in some awareness, maybe checking in with yourself to understand what are the feelings coming up for you around the change? What are the needs that you might be having? And again, knowing that you might not be able to meet all of those needs or get them met, focusing on what is in your control, what is not. For someone who needs a lot of stability and security in their lives, the change might disrupt that, but what can you keep stable? What normalcy can you keep in that? For someone who maybe needs more autonomy and control, they need a avenue to have their grievances heard. Maybe they can't have that conversation with the person they would really like to grieve to, but maybe they need another outlet for expression. So I think part of it is building in some self-awareness. What's going on with me right now? Why is this so hard? And also, I just want to normalize change is hard. Change
Yeah.
can be really hard. So there's nothing wrong with you, but what is it that you're needing right now? And how can you get your needs met in some way?
Your coaching, when I was looking up your information, you really focus on helping people, organizations, or individuals tap into their own wisdom rather than just giving them the answers, even though you might say it clearly. Why do you feel that that's important rather than helping them to come to the answers within themselves?
Yeah, you used the word empowering earlier, and that's how I was trained in coaching is to ask empowering questions. And I received coaching myself prior to becoming a coach, and that really helped me to make decisions from that place that is guided by my own inner wisdom. So I really value that. I believe that people are resourceful and have that inner wisdom, and that, one of my early clients, and she's someone I've worked with kind of on and off for over the years, but she came to me and she was like, I'm looking for a leadership coach and I really want to know, kind of how you would work with me. And I told her, well, I really, she's like, how would you advise me? And I was like, well, I really work with you to kind of figure out what your own inner wisdom and resourcefulness and how that guides you. And she was like, I really like that because usually when someone tells me what to do, I don't wanna do it anyway, you know? And so it's like, I mean, I just think it's valuable to recognize that we do have that inner wisdom and resourcefulness and to help people tap into that and make decisions from that place.
Yeah, I that's definitely there's so much value to that. I definitely have had people that I've paid for their coaching and then they've told me what to do and I've been so resistant just by the nature of them telling me this is what you have to do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
So how
oh,
Yes,
go
go ahead. Go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's definitely like a process of kind of co-designing even when because coaching is action oriented, but that action, I might suggest like, "Oh, I think this is the next step." But usually what I do is, have them identify, "Okay, what do you wanna do? What's the next thing? How committed are you to it? How will I know that you've done like, what kind of accountability or support could you use?" But it's really for them to name, not for me to prescribe.
Oh, I love that. For them to name, not for you to prescribe. That's a great statement. So, how can people work with you? How can they connect with you? You have a website, you definitely have a business name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was sharing my business name is Dr. Christine Pettit Coaching and Consulting, so very straightforward. I have my website, and I think we'll share the links to
Yep.
that, but it's Dr. Christine Pettit, and that's PETIT.com. And then I have a podcast, Resourced and Resourceful Leadership. So that's a place where you can hear my musings on life and leadership, as well as I interview people occasionally as well. So I have that, and I would love to be connected. So there's ways to connect through my website and social media as well.
Amazing. Congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. And so, for anybody who's listening to this and they're resonating with the message, they're realizing they're understanding. Hey, I've been constricted by these systems. Regardless of what that this system is, and they don't know where to start in their life, in their business. What? And this is a loaded question. What's one place? And you did mention this before. One thing. What is within your control? What is one thing that they can start with?
Yeah, I think really beginning to tap into your inner wisdom and recognizing that it is there. And we might call it different names and have different ways to access it. But one of my favorite practices is the inner wise self love note. And it's a practice that I learned from the artist and author Sark, Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy. And you just set a timer for 3 minutes and write from the perspective of your inner wise self. And the idea is that you have this wise person inside of you who holds you with unconditional positive regard and you can always access that. And so you can ask a question or you can just start writing and see what comes out. But just starting to attune to your own inner wisdom and resourcefulness, as well as, again, looking at what's in your sphere of control. I'm a big fan of, I always go back to the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to the wisdom, God,
Right.
accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So that helps me kind of parse things out as well.
What a way to end. Those are two powerful things that people can start with, and I love that you do this as well. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you.
yeah, thank you for being with me today, Christine. This is a great episode on just how to actually start unmuting when systems have been there and just understanding systems. I mean, this is a I feel like we keep talking, but giving having just even a glimpse of what can it look like if we start to affect change a little bit in our life and have that little glimpse of hope that things
Mm,
can change. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for the conversation.
absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for helping people unmute in midlife. I really love that.
Thank you. And this show was brought to you by Project Icon.